Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to use the promo code FSD20 for a 20% discount on the products over at fantasyguru.com. Yes, indeed. Fantasy Sports Daily here with oh my God, we got music still going on. This is so exciting. It's so exciting here to be part of the show with Rich Maletto. I'm having echo. Rich, my God, are you hearing double sounds or is it just me? I'm so excited. I'm hearing myself in my eardrums.
I am not. You actually sound really great. I'm not hearing an echo.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Okay. Well, okay. Well, I tell you what, this was a professional start to the show. Kyle Elfrink is gone, and 6 seconds in, I've already ruined the entire show. I am Ray Flowers. Kyle Elfrink is again. He's away on vacation right now. He'll be back, I guess, on Friday. That's at least the plan here. Rich Maletto from fantasyguru.com is going to be with me for the next 45 minutes, hour, whatever it might be here. So we're hopefully not going to miss a beat for all of you. We're going to do what we normally do. Again, I'm Ray Flowers. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRayFlowers. You can find me on Threads and Instagram and all those spots. And that is Rich Maletto. Rich, now that we're back on track, I'm so worried about you feeling comfortable in your first show doing this with me. And I'm the one that screwed it all up. So that's how it goes. Occam's razor, I guess. But Rich, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, thank you so much. Like I feel really giddy, man. Like I feel pretty honored to be on here with you. I've been looking forward to this. I know we did a short little pod last year for the draft guide, and I told you I hoped one day to do a pod or a stream with you. So I'm really excited and looking forward to this. And hey, don't worry about my comfort level. I work outside of comfort zone all the time, but hey, you already do a better job with this technology, so I'm not judging over the music and the echo because I can't figure it out.
I got it figured out now, but it's so hilarious. We're talking about before the show about technology, and Rich was like, accidentally hit his microphone once, and I'm smooth sailing, right? Everything's locked in, everything's good over here, and then the show starts, and I'm the one that screws it up. So hey, man, that's just how it goes. We're gonna be better the rest of the way. Rich and Ray here. Again, Fantasy Sports Dailies, obviously at 11 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Friday. Again, Kyle will be back on tomorrow's show. Rich and I are going to kind of follow the similar, path that we normally follow here on the show. And so here, let's throw up our kind of quick rundown. We're going to talk a lot of Thursday night football, an injury update on Amari Cooper and how that might impact the Browns offense. We got that this morning, so we'll talk about that. We'll look ahead to Saturday. Rich and I aren't the biggest let's set lineups a week in advance kind of people, right? But we'll take a look a little bit at the Saturday football game. We'll talk about the quarterback position, which in general is down to the point where Rich and I are pulling our hair out because we're trying to decide whether people should be playing Tyler Heineke or Nick Mullins. We've been doing this for a couple of weeks now. It's a disaster. Injuries all over the place. We'll talk about that. The weekly streamers article that Rich writes over at fantasyguru.com. We'll hit on that and some of the players that are mentioned there. And then you see the promo codes FSD20, get you that 20% discount on all the products at fantasyguru.com. And then if you want to sign up for the DFS package, now through the Super Bowl, it's $50. So you get all the fantasy football DFS coverage. That's articles, live streams, coaching breakdowns, all that kind of stuff. And Rich, I know there's a lot of people that are still in the finals this week in fantasy football in the seasonal aspect, but the idea that those people could transition over to DFS or even the people that have been knocked out, spend some time with us the rest of the way through the Super Bowl playing DFS. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, for sure. And let's not downplay playoff leagues either. I've been taking a couple of questions in Discord about folks already looking forward. Where can they play some playoff leagues? And we've always had content on that in the past. But I'm with you, Ray. This is especially as, like, for example, Hard Rock has the app in Florida now. So for those folks that have been in Florida, haven't been able to do sports betting, now's an opportunity to do a little bit of dabbling in onshore legal sports betting. So I'm all for it. This is the perfect time. I know Jeff likes the bigger slates for DFS. I have a lot more success with the smaller slates, and it's probably because I'm not a very good DFS player. But I find the smaller slates, especially during the playoffs, a great opportunity to play DFS, to do some of the sports betting. So I'm right with you. And honestly, $50 for now. I'll be shocked if you paid that $50 and you didn't win that back or at least double up. I really would be.
Yeah, and it's a great way also to just get introduced to the product at fantasyguru.com. Maybe you just found the show here. Maybe you just found Jeff's show on SiriusXM. Maybe you stumbled across us on social media, whatever it might be. It's kind of a good teaser for what you'll get, obviously if you sign up with us for next season as well. Let's dive into some of the action here. And I jokingly said, and you and I have gone back and forth offline about this a little bit, Rich, the fact that, I get why people want to set their lineups early in the week. You get why people want to set their lineups early in the week. But, the fact that, someone asked a question on a Wednesday morning and then they asked the question on a Friday morning and then they asked the question on the Sunday morning, it's like, we need information. And one of the biggest topics the last couple of weeks, of course, is Joe Flacco. And we have the Thursday night football game between the Jets and the Browns. Joe Flacco, Joe Flacco, Joe Flacco, Joe Flacco. 40 passes every week, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like, the numbers are great. We knew that Amari Cooper had a foot issue, right? He was hobbling around a little bit on the touchdown he scored the other day. And okay, we got news from Tom Pelissero this morning that the team is hopeful that Cooper will play. Talk to us a little bit about Cooper and Flacco now, because Flacco's outlook drastically changes, obviously, if he's going to be without his number one wide receiver. Talk to us about those two guys.
It's interesting because we did have a Flacco game where Cooper really wasn't playing much. If we go back to, was it the game he took over after the concussion, or
yeah,
the following game? Cooper,
mm-hmm.
Cooper kind of left the game, and we saw Elijah Moore really fill in. That was the game we saw the ADOT for Elijah Moore just kind of skyrocket, right? So I'm not as worried about okay, let me back up a little bit. I am a bit of a Browns fan, so I have to understand my bias in all of this, okay? Mm-hmm. Like, I push people away or towards things because my fandom, like I told someone, I'm not grabbing Dustin Hopkins. I get he's the number one kicker. I've had such bad mojo with Browns kickers. I didn't want that mojo on my team, type of thing. Okay. Silly. It's stupid. It's not necessarily a logical way to approach. What I'm getting at is I'm not as worried about Cooper from a Browns standpoint. I think the Browns can get away with Elijah Moore filling in that role and them turning to either Bell, who we've seen actually make a couple of splash plays, or Tillman. Tillman's been on the field a lot. Okay. So I think the Browns can get away as far as this game goes. And let's be honest, if there's two Browns players that are really looking forward to this game, I think it's Elijah Moore and Joe Flacco. I'm not big into the revenge narrative for the most part, but those are two players that if I were them, I'd be a little chippy about this game, especially Elijah Moore, right? I mean, he was kind of basically just jettisoned. Flacco was, if I'm the Jets, I'm probably more wishful I kept Flacco around given how the season has gone. But I'm not as concerned in that regard. I think Moore can step in. I think Flacco will be fine. This is a tough matchup anyway. Like, I think the whole 350 yards, 44 attempts, may want to temper that a little bit. Maybe he does start approaching that 30, 40 attempts range against this defense. But I think it would be smart for the Browns to lean on Njoku and the Browns running backs in the passing game than it would be, because I already was concerned about Cooper facing Sauce Gardner. Like, as handsy as Sauce Gardner is, that Cooper struggles with that type of coverage anyway. So I was a little bit concerned with Cooper coming into the matchup. So honestly, if I'm a Cooper owner, I'm kind of hoping he's not playing so that headache, I don't have that decision of a headache I don't have to make.
What is if you, let's say Joe Flacco is your quarterback 15 this week, hypothetically, if Cooper is out, how far do we drop him given everything? Like, do we drop him a spot or two? Is he just now out for you? I know you said you think the offense can still work, but what about Flacco in particular?
Honestly, I don't think he moves a whole lot for me. I do think that 15-ish range, and I heard you and Jeff talking about it on air yesterday. I think that's probably the right spot for him. I don't know that I would move him up or down regardless if Cooper was in. Like, I don't think he's such a difference maker for this offense and Flacco overall that it's a big mover for me. He's without his starting receiver. Sure, I could take it down a notch or two. But like I said, that first game, Cooper really wasn't a factor. And I thought, it had people betting on Elijah Moore the following week. And Elijah Moore's been nothing since then, right? So okay. I think 15, regardless if Cooper plays, is probably a good spot for him.
We have an interesting scenario because I think you have too. We've bashed Atlanta. Like, what the hell's the coaching staff doing? They're not using their weapons, all of that. In the case of the Browns, you have a coaching staff that has completely changed what they're trying to do. And you've got to give them so much credit, right? It was 26 passes, 27 passes, 26. Now it's Joe Flacco time. We're throwing it 40 plus times. They lost all their offensive linemen. They lost Nick Chubb. They've totally revamped the offense. You mentioned the guys in the backfield, Hunt and Ford, obviously at the top of that list. What do you think with those two this week? Because it's like, Hunt really seems to need to get in the end zone. He's not a dynamic guy at this point. He's beat up physically. Ford's got a little bit more shiftiness. He's a little bit more involved, all that kind of stuff, but he doesn't really produce much on a weekly basis. Is this a scenario where you said lean more on the running backs? Are you thinking that the running backs like Ford catching 5 passes this week if Amari Cooper is down? Are you talking about them having to lean more just on the rushing attack because of the matchup with the Jets?
Look, hats off to Kevin Stefanski and the staff. I see a lot of Browns fans bashing them throughout this year, and I question their sanity because between the injuries and, to your point, the changes they've had to make, like, they really do deserve kudos. I mean, this is this is the best the offense has looked all year, and it's a complete 180 from when they signed Deshaun Watson, right? My opinion, if I'm the Browns, I don't think you're going to run well on the Jets. Like, Jerome Ford has not produced well enough as just a pound the ground kind of runner. He needs to be really – Stefanski should kind of look at what the Rams and Kyren Williams have done, in my opinion. Kyren and Jerome, to me, they're similar style backs. I think Kyren runs with a little more power and a little more – I don't know he's smarter. Like, he sees it a little bit better. So I don't want to say that they're the same guy and take credit away from Kyren. But if you look at how the Rams use Kyren, who's also not a very big back, and they have no problem throwing to him 7, 8, 9 times a game, and then the following week not throwing to him at all, right? It kind of depends on the game script. That's what I think the Browns should do. I think the best way to get the Jets defense back on their heels is to slow down that rush, right? I mean, their strength is bringing pressure. So I feel like the best way to do that is screens, quick dump offs, quick slants, little things like that. But you got to be able to spread them out and use your running backs and your tight ends to kind of keep those linebackers and safeties off the line a little bit so that you're not, forced into making bonehead plays. I mean, that's what the Jets are going to do. They're very common to what the Browns do, what the Ravens do. I mean, the Browns should have an idea how to battle this because they face a pretty good defense every day in practice. But I think the running backs need to be more involved in the passing game. And you're spot on with Kareem Hunt. He's going to get his 40% touches, but if he doesn't get in the end zone, his 3.7 yards a carry just isn't going to do much for you. And Ford, look, if we haven't gotten a touchdown from him, we've been lucky to get 8 to 10 points. And last week we got that touchdown. It was very Ty Chandler-esque, but between the two of them, they had 17 or 21 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that was it. So if Cooper, and especially to your point, if Cooper's out, you better find a way to get some other playmakers involved. And maybe we're downplaying Cedric Tillman's role in all this if Cooper is out.
We got a question in chat from Taylor, Rich, saying, I have Cooper in my flex currently. Do you guys like David Montgomery or Mr. Ford better? It's one of those questions, again, we knew it was going to come up. Let's just address it. We don't know if Cooper's playing. We don't know. We're going to find more information, blah, blah, blah. We know he's not 100%. Okay, it's a short week. What do you think? If you had to choose for your flex, are you going Cooper, David Montgomery, or Ford? Okay,
let's just assume Cooper's active and healthy. I'm still going Monty. Now, I will say this. Please, Taylor, please tell me you're not actually playing Cooper in the flex. Since Cooper's a Thursday night play, I really hope you're not putting them in the actual flex spot. But of these 3 players, I'm going Monty. And I know it was on your show sheet for today, Ray, but I don't want to jump the gun here. But Monty's been getting 15 to 17 touches a week. Like, I don't know how you just – and he's the red zone guy. It's not like they're using Gibbs inside the 5-yard line. So, personally, Monty's got to be a top 20, top 24 play for me just about every week. Like, I don't know how you sit him, period.
All right, and we will circle back to that game, that Saturday night game here in a second. Thanks for the question, Taylor. He mentions he's got Diggs and A.J. Brown, and my response would probably be the same as you, Rich. Get in a league that plays 3 wide receivers. Like, these 2 wide receiver leagues are so bad. All you're doing is hurting yourself. You put a great team together and you can't play your players. So, but yeah, obviously, speaking of that, since Diggs is there, he's got Brown and Diggs. What are your thoughts on Diggs? Jeff and I talked about him on SiriusXM yesterday. That shows, the Elite Sports shows 3 to 5, Monday through Friday Eastern time. And we both said, look, we know that it's been bad. We know that Diggs is struggling to get 50 yards and all that. But we both said, if we have Diggs, he's obviously a start. We're not even questioning it. Would you question starting Diggs this week?
No. I'm in the championship in a league, And Diggs has been in my lineup since the bye week. And we've taken plenty of questions on him. And I get that. But he's still getting target volume, Ray. I mean, if you watch the game, it's hard for you to – it's not like Diggs is disappearing. It's not like you don't see him out there either, even balls that, penalties come up. See, sometimes people watch the box score, don't realize how skewed the target and yards are with the penalties. I mean, there's a couple of times I go to the box score after watching the game and I'm like, he only had 3 targets? That doesn't seem right. Well, it's because 4 of them came off the board due to penalties. Well, there's a big difference between 7 and 3, right? I'm playing Diggs. You take the good with the bad. I've come to this conclusion with fantasy, and I know it frustrates people, and it frustrates my cousin. Just because you got someone scoring points on the bench doesn't mean they're a better player, doesn't mean that's the best bench play. Making decisions in fantasy is seriously 3/4 of the battle anyway. And you and Jeff talk about it. Why have 8 guys that are all the same on your roster? Like all that's going to do is create a bunch of headaches and guesswork. I would rather find a way, and I'm not a big trading guy, but I'd rather find a way to combine 2-3 of those into a tier up. So now I know that player's locked in and so on. Diggs is in that tier up. If we go back to what he did at the beginning of the year, and guess what? What's going to happen, and you know this, Ray, you've seen it. Everybody's going to bench him that's been talking about benching him this week, and he's going to have a bounce-back game and put up 28 points for fantasy on 130 yards and 2 touchdowns or something. And it's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen this week, all those playoff leagues we were talking about that are running through week 18 and all the other stuff, it's going to happen there. It never fails. We get so hung up into what happened recently that I think we lose sight. And I think you baseball guys have a better understanding of this because baseball is so long, right? Like you guys joke about the droughts. Like someone's going to hit a spot here where they're not batting well. And so you either have to manage around it, but at the same time, you're watching for when it's going to break. In some point over the next couple of weeks, it's going to break, and you need to be willing to put that player back into your lineups again. So I'm using them. I think people are overstating the panic on Diggs personally. The Bills are winning, so Diggs isn't flipping out like we've seen in the past. I'm using them.
On the other side of things with this, going back to the Browns game, Rich, there's 2 players that anyone cares about. We can try to talk about other ancillary options, but it's Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, starts for people because we're speaking volume. He's frequently getting double-digit targets no matter who the quarterback is. And then there's Breece Hall. Because there's been questions, we're at that time of year where people are struggling at the running back position, and it's like, I don't know how the hell you made the finals, or they've got 25 guys, and it's like, I've really struggled a couple times to tell people, look, of the guys you listed, I'm not starting Breece Hall, but overall, don't you have to start Breece Hall? Even if you're concerned about, is he going to catch 5 passes or 10 passes? Like the passing game involvement really has to be there for him to pay off because this team just doesn't score points.
I'm probably the opposite of you. I'm the guy that's going, I can't sit Breece Hall. Like I'm not telling you to sit these other guys ahead of him, but I can't sit Breece Hall. And the reason I come back to that is he's so electric. He doesn't need 30 touches or 20 touches to be all that impactful. What they did last week, it's mind-boggling because where was this activity in use for the last 3 months? I mean,
should have been there
from work in the past. Yeah. He doesn't need. I mean, get the guy 3 to 5 targets in the passing game. Get him 12 to 15 carries. I don't think that's outlandish by any means. We see other teams doing that with even folks like Jerome Ford will have weeks like that. And Breece Hall is way more electric than any of those running backs. And it's just a shame to see how they're using him. I've been using Breece Hall. I'm glad he finally came around, but I tell you what, it burned people up until last week, Ray. Probably the previous 4 to 6 weeks, outside of 1 or 2 weeks here or there. I mean, it was a struggle, but I'm with you. The thing about running back, and you probably know these numbers better than I do, but I went and looked. The difference between like running back 24 and running back 36 was like 4 points, I think, 3 points really at one point. I mean, we're talking, you and Jeff have said down there, dude scores a touchdown this week, and all of a sudden he's a top 20 running back. 1 touchdown. I mean, forget about the days, CMC having 21, but I mean, imagine someone having a Mixon having a 2 or 3 touchdown game, and all of a sudden he jumps to running back 5, right? I mean, we're splitting hairs with the way these guys are being used. And I got to be honest, Ray, I'm a little disappointed in the coaching and the lack of willingness to use running backs properly, at least in my opinion. I don't know why we're splitting up the work they are. I don't know why they're not using him in the passing game more. Like, I'm very perplexed. You mentioned Arthur Smith in Atlanta. That's a prime example. I do not understand the running back usage there.
Well, you got to get Brownlee and Lazard their targets, and Gibson. You can't get it to Brees Hall. Yeah, and we were talking about this yesterday too, Jeff and I. It's like we're dopes on a couch, and it's like sometimes we can look at this and be like, "You're not doing that right." And hopefully the Jets will do it right and just put the ball in the hands of their playmakers, because they have two of them, and they need them to do anything if they have a chance to win a football game, which is going to be a struggle against the Browns. Let's leave that game, Rich, and move to Saturday night. And Saturday's got one game this week. It's Detroit going to Dallas. The storyline is such that I think the spread was 7 points yesterday. It's dropped to 5.5 today as I'm looking at it live here. The over-under is 53.5. Yeah. The Lions, well, Jared Goff is inarguably lesser statistically impressive on the road. Okay. It's not catastrophic, but he is better at home. The Cowboys never lose at home. They score a gazillion points on them. They set a record 7 straight games to open the year with 30-plus points at home. I think they've won 15 games in a row at home. So this is it. This is David versus Goliath in some scenarios, which is interesting because if you look at things overall, these teams are much closer than that. What are your thoughts, since we don't talk about it a lot here on the show? What are your thoughts on the numbers there, the 5.5 point spread and the 53.5 over under for the Lions and the Cowboys?
It's already moved half a point in the last hour, which I thought was funny, right. I made a point to look right before I hopped on with you, and it was 6. I checked in a couple of spots. I get a half point's not a lot, but I made note that it was 6 because that's a touchdown. 5.5, it makes it a lot easier to not get caught by the hook, right? So, I mean, that's something to note, and why he pays the shop lines. You hit the nail on the head. What I find interesting is Goff is not real good on the road, and the Cowboys defense is incredibly tougher at home. Like their home away splits are also kind of odd and peculiar. So I'm with you. This is like the worst or the bad side of one team facing the good side of a good team. You know what I mean? Coming together there. I honestly think the 53.5, I don't know if that's gone up at all, seems high. The reason I say that is I do think Goff is going to struggle. So I don't expect a whole ton of points from the Cow or the Lions side. That said, hey, you could argue the Cowboys should just thump them. I think the Lions are going to play inspired, and Dak hasn't looked good the last couple of weeks. I know he had been on fire going into those last couple of weeks, but it wasn't just last week that he struggled. He looked a little rough the week before too. So I think the points are a little high. I think it's going to be one of the best games we're going to have of the weekend, though, because it's two teams that have a lot to play for, right? I mean, they're both playoff bound, but they've got things on the line. I mean, San Francisco doesn't have the number 1 seed locked up quite yet.
We were talking right before we went on air here, before my tech issues, about Jameson Williams, and there's been a lot. He was drafted too highly last year. He was drafted too highly this year. Overall, he's been a huge disappointment given the draft capital. He just has. It's a fact. But he started to make some plays. And interestingly enough, the last couple of weeks there, Williams has really started to ascend in his role in this offense with the Lions. Talk to us a little bit about him. And, he's not someone we're saying you got to start or anything like that. Right. But there are worse options. If you're starting 3 wide receivers, you got to flex. You're in a deep league. There are worse options this week than, throwing a dart at Jameson Williams.
Well, in the streaming article, I really struggled to find a couple receivers. I mean, for example, Parker Washington, I had noted, right? The only reason I had him noted is all the injuries in Jacksonville. Zay Jones potentially out again, Christian Kirk out. There's got to be bodies that step up. Well, you go and look at Parker Washington's numbers and 4 targets, 2 catches, nothing great. And you look at Jameson Williams, and I'm largely in line with how you and Jeff kind of teed it up when you guys brought him up earlier this year on air. He's kind of a one-trick pony, right? Or at least he was. He was the guy stretching the field. He was getting his 2 to 3 targets, maybe 4 on a good week. But they were all kind of long balls. You were hoping for 1, 2 catches and 70 yards, maybe 1 for a touchdown. That's what you're hopeful for. But you may be stuck with 2 catches, 19 yards, and nothing, right? I mean, that was kind of the range. Well, over the last 2 games, he's seen 6 and 7 targets apiece. His long receptions of 12 and 18 yards, and he's racked up just shy of 50 yards. So that tells me they're using him much more judiciously, I guess you could say, right? They're not just using him to stretch the field. They're trying to find ways to get him in space and let him do his thing. I'm not sure what that really works out to long term. I'm not a huge fan of kind of these slight built receivers, but teams are finding places for them. Jordan Addison, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle. I mean, the list goes Tank Dell. Teams are finding ways to use these guys. So we're going to have to kind of readjust our thinking. I don't think we're completely off and all of a sudden the NFL is changing and, receivers that are 5'8", 180 pounds are going to set the world on fire. But I think we need to understand that we're seeing more and more of that, how they're being used. Jameson's not a bad streamer play, Ray. I mean, I'm kind of bummed I didn't notice that for the streamer article because 6 to 8 targets, 45, 47 yards, that's an 8 to 10 point PPR day. You get a touchdown in there and now you have a difference maker and he's capable of doing that. So, if you're scraping to get by at the receiver position, last minute Cooper's out, for example, today, and you don't have a lot of options. Jameson Williams is largely available in most leagues.
We'll circle back to that streaming article that Rich wrote here in a little bit with some other names there. So you can obviously find it over at fantasyguru.com. Again, use that promo code FSD20 to sign up for anything, 20% off if you haven't already. Hopefully you have already. Hopefully you're enjoying the free show here, but you're also partaking in the pay product that we have over at the website. Rich and the crew do a lot of great work over there that you're missing out on if you're not part of it. On the rushing side of this game with the Lions and the Cowboys, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, Mr. Pollard, Tony Pollard. All three of these guys are starting for people. Like, I don't think there's many scenarios at all, although we got a question earlier, so I guess there are some where, we're not starting these three guys. Anything that pops, you mentioned earlier the usage of Montgomery, anything that pops with any of these three guys, Montgomery, Gibbs, or Pollard, that says to Rich Maletto, this is going to be a great week, says this is going to be a scary bad week, anything like that? Or is it just more of the, hey, man, these guys are getting their 15 touches, they have prominent roles in good offenses, and you're going to be playing them regardless?
I think it's more the latter, right? I don't want to sit here and say the Cowboys' rush defense is super tough and you can't run on it because we saw 2 weeks ago that's just simply not the case. Thank you, James Cook. Oddly enough, a guy that was barely getting enough carries to make an impact in the running game decides to torch the Cowboys, who have been a top 5, top 6 rush defense. It just goes to show you it's the NFL. There's only so much you can do prediction with game scripts and whatnot. And we're all still human, and coaches come up with ways to be creative, and you still have to go out there and play. So nothing is ever a lock. I'm playing them. What I found most interesting is when you pulled this up, is I kind of went and just dug up on Gibbs and Pollard. Gibbs and Pollard are kind of the same guy, right? I mean, if you look at touches, use, all that, they're very, very similar. And what I find interesting is then you go and look at Montgomery, and Montgomery's still getting his 15 to 17 carries a game. It's not really used in the passing game, a target or two, but regardless if Gibbs is getting 11 or 15 touches as far as rushing attempts, Montgomery is still getting 15 to 17. You see Pollard getting that same kind of volume that Gibbs gets, but you don't see anyone else on Dallas doing that kind of running, which was just something interesting I kind of noticed as I was digging into this. But I'm using all three. I'm not going to get super creative here and say avoid this or avoid that. Use the three of them and hope for the best. I guess if of all the ones I'm most concerned with, it's probably Pollard, actually, which seems weird because you got two running backs on the Detroit side, so you got to figure one could eat into the other. But I'll be honest, Ray, the one I'm more concerned about is Pollard.
Yeah, Pollard, there's been a lot of talk recently about he's healthier now. Guys don't generally get healthy in season in the NFL, but he's healthier now and he's got his spring back. I'm not really seeing that. I mean, he's not the same back he was the last couple of years. And this happens a lot when that backup running back gets put in this number one seat and the 11 touches a week go to 19 a week. It's hard. It's very hard because fantasy space, always want the backup guy because they always look better, right? They look better because they're out there with 8 carries a week, and they're out there in the fourth quarter when the defense is tired, and there's an 18-point spread, and they're just ripping wide open. It's a different game. So Pollard just hasn't been the same guy. And I think a big difference there, too, is he hasn't been the touchdown maker. Gibbs and Montgomery, to your point, Rich, those guys score touchdowns. Pollard, it's been hit or miss with that piece, even with the success of the Cowboys offense. So that's something to think about as we sit here in Week 17. We did have a question in the chat from Alan M. He needs to sit one of the following players. And I bring this up because you mentioned James Cook, who is one of the options here. James Cook had the big workload last week, didn't do much with it for the Bills. James Cook, Rashee Rice, Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper. It's a PPR league. We need to sit one of them. Is it as simple as saying Cooper's not 100%? He's out? Is it Devontae Adams is catching passes in an offense where we don't know if they're going to throw for 120 yards? Is it James Cook? Is it Rashee Rice? Who sits out on this one, Rich? Tough one.
For me, it's Cooper, and it's not real close. The reason for that, I don't want to use Cooper that's banged up on a Thursday night football game against a defense that's throwing out there Sauce Gardner, who at times gives everybody a headache. So for me, I have no problem sitting Cooper here and looking forward to the weekend. I know Aiden O'Connell didn't throw or complete a pass after the first quarter, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But look, if he's that bad, then just throw Jimmy G in. Like, I mean, either that's going to improve, or I guess he's already a dead man walking the coach because he's in an interim role. But I can't sit Adams. I know Cook was disappointing last week, but the 4 games before that, he had been league winners. So I'm using Cook. And honestly, Rice's last week, 8, 9, 10 points in a PPR was okay. But if you go back and look in the last 3 games, I believe he's got 50 targets. It's 3 or 4 games, 50 targets and 38 receptions. He is the leading receiver in that offense. And I get Kansas City's offense has been meh, but I'm not sitting Rice right now. So James Cook and Rice are automatic for me. I'm using them. I'm taking the good with the bad. I can't play Cooper over Adams. I'm worried about Cooper in this matchup, and he's dinged up as it is, Ray. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I don't see 250 or even 150 going to Cooper tonight.
Rich Maletto, Ray Flowers here on Fantasy Sports Daily. Again, Kyle Frank's gone. He'll be back tomorrow on Friday. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. You can obviously find the show as well. Maybe you're listening right now that way, in fact, on podcasts. We've got it set up all over the place. So you can either watch us here at youtube.com/@ElitePlusNetwork. We post the video of the show and the audio, obviously, over at fantasyguru.com every day. You can also find us on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So check out for Fantasy Sports Daily there. We talked a little bit earlier, so we switched gears away from the 2 games to more of a broad look at Week 17, Rich. We talked about the quarterback position. We've talked about Amari Cooper and Joe Flacco on and on and on. So we've already hit on that topic. We didn't hit on the Russell Wilson news yesterday on the show because it legitimately happened. The report broke like 1 minute before the show was over. So we didn't get a chance to talk about it. Obviously, everyone knows by now Russell Wilson has been removed as a starter. It's a financial decision. It seems like his career with the Broncos is over. Stidham is in now as the starter for the Broncos. Talk to me and the listeners about Stidham in the offense now and what your thoughts are there with the entire Broncos scenario, because there's a lot of people at fantasyguru.com that had Russell Wilson as either their 1 or their 2 at the quarterback position, and he was effective without being great. And those people are now scrambling here in championship week trying to find a quarterback replacement.
This isn't a cop-out, but if I had Russ Wilson and I didn't, Flacco's not out there, I guess you could take a stab on Nick Mullins. Pick up Jarrett Stidham. I mean, I don't have high hopes, but I do have hopes that he can manage the offense to at least the degree that Russell Wilson was. I mean, more and more reports are coming out that Wilson and Peyton don't get along. Peyton doesn't like what he sees. They went out and added Stidham early on. I mean, I grabbed Stidham in a couple of deep leagues because there were questions on Russ. People were thinking Russ is cooked, not that Russ needs to cook, right? So, I don't think you're going to set the world on fire with Stidham, but I mean, I don't know, Ray. I think it's reasonable to expect 15 to 17 or 18 points from Stidham in this offense.
Yeah, and it's tough. I think that, and we've talked a lot about this previously, going team quarterback, which I think is something we have to consider, because then at least you're not, if you're the Russell Wilson person, you lose Wilson, you've got Stidham, at least you've got that quarterback, and then you can make the decision versus having to run to the waiver wire because, there's 4 different quarterbacks this week. We don't even know if Nick Mullins is playing this week. There's all these scenarios that are still up in the air. Do you want to use Taylor? Do you want to use Brissett? Maybe we can talk more about that next year, especially in super flex leagues or 2 QB leagues. I think that's something really that we need to discuss more about as a community. But yeah, I think Stidham, it's a good offense, in the sense that he won't be asked to do too much. He's not going to be asked to throw the ball 45 times. He's not going to be asked to carry the offense. He'll be asked to go out there and do his thing. Now, we don't know with Cortland Sutton, right? He's still uncertain to play this weekend. Yeah, so with the cut. So with that, that is something to think about. But I think that's an issue with all the quarterbacks. I mean, we talked about Flacco and Cooper. We're talking now about the situation with the Broncos. We've got a situation with Trevor Lawrence. We don't know if he's going to play and what he's going to look like. We've got Jacoby Brissett facing the 49ers. You've got Tyrod Taylor in a difficult matchup as well. Like, there are quarterbacks that you could turn to this week, and people are going to have to turn to this week. Taylor Heineke, like, people are going to have to do this kind of stuff. But it seems like all of these guys have questions. It's one thing to have a question about, you know, is Jacoby Brissett a good play against the 49ers? He's got all his weapons. In the case of Stidham, he may not have Sutton. In the case of Flacco, he may not have Cooper. In the case of, so you know what I'm saying here, Rich? It's a difficult minefield to navigate this week when we're talking about the streamers at the quarterback position.
I think you hit the nail on the head. You're spot on. And I forgot about the Sutton injury. And actually, one of the topics you wanted to discuss today was all the injuries. And I think sometimes for fantasy, we lose track of, Cooper's hurt, so we're worried about Cooper. But are we really paying attention to the 3 offensive linemen that went down? You know, Trevor Lawrence, have we really, they placed the Buccaneers last week, but they still are on their 3rd and 4th string left tackle. Do we not talk about that? Because if you watch the game, it wasn't a problem with the lack of receiving options he had. He was still trying to find ways to dish up the ball. It was the problem that he couldn't protect himself and the line couldn't protect him. And we don't talk about that often enough, I think. So it's a really good point on Stidham, because I forgot, without Sutton out there, and let's be honest, Sutton has been kind of, I don't want to say Russ's security blanket, but he's bailed out Russ all. I mean, you knew at this point, and Jeff talked about it on air, Sutton has those numbers where it makes you nervous to use, right? Like, fantasy points wise, you're happy. But when you go look at the target share and, ADOT and all those other things that go with it, it's like, ooh, boy, we've been kind of lucky with Sutton. If he's not catching that 70-yard touchdown, ooh, this is a rough game for me. So that's a very valid point. And I'm sitting here going, geez, Jared Stidham or Tyrod against the Niners. Like, wow, he does have his weapons, but wow, that's especially coming off that embarrassing loss to the Ravens. I don't know if I want that action, Ray. Well,
let's circle back for a second to Trevor Lawrence, because, if you're playing Brissett or Tyrod Taylor, even Stidham, like, okay, be reasonable, right? Trevor Lawrence is a weekly starter, right? And we can have debates about, has he lived up to expectations, which he hasn't, blah, 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 blah. But if he starts this week, what is your confidence level in him? Because, they're saying the shoulder's not a big deal. He didn't finish the game last week. A third of the league, at least this week at the quarterback position, are just throwing randos up there. It's probably more than that. Like, where would you be at with Trevor Lawrence if, again, we get the all green that he's been cleared to start this week?
So last week, and I'm going to be transparent with everybody. Last week in Discord, I said, regardless if Lawrence was starting, I was using Flacco over Lawrence. Okay. Mm-hmm. Saturday night came around and I readjusted my rankings or my list and flex start sit. And I didn't publish it anywhere, but I went in a league and I did turn around and put Lawrence in over Flacco, because he's been an every week starter facing a Tampa Bay defense that had been terrible. I turned on that game and the wife had to hide sharp objects. I was so upset with myself because for 3 days I was very adamant about what I was going to do. And really what upset me the most was there was no way I was going to be able to go back on Discord and tell everybody I changed my mind. Right. So now I feel like I got a double standard. I said I was going to do something and now I reneged on it. And you know what? It bit me. Wouldn't have mattered anyway, but 30 points versus 9 points. Point I'm getting at is Lawrence's shoulder wasn't hurt that whole game. Lawrence looked terrible that whole game. The Buccaneers have been shredded numerous times this year by different teams that are met for passing offenses anyway. So I got to tell you, Lawrence, he's got to be near where we talked about Flacco being QB 15-ish. Right. I think Lawrence is right 15, 16. I would, even in a tough matchup without Cooper, I'm using Flacco right now over Trevor Lawrence. He has looked better. The line is beat up, and Flacco maybe throwing 2 picks, but he's still throwing 300 yards, and he is not nearly as beat up. He's not running around dropping the ball off the side of his leg because he forgot how to carry a ball.
It's so bad.
It's so bad right now in Jacksonville. And I don't know. They're mad at the receivers. Ridley's not running the right routes, and he's the only mainstay you have left outside the tight end Ingram. Parker Washington can't get in his good graces because he either runs the wrong hot route or gets his quarterback hurt. The offensive line, like I said, I know they threw in their 4th string tackle last week. So Lawrence is down the ways. I'll play Lawrence over Stidham, over Aiden O'Connell, over, some of these other guys. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to throw out there Tua,
Kyler Murray. What about Kyler Murray?
I would use Kyler over Trevor Lawrence right now.
We talked about Jared Goff, who struggles on the road. Would you use Jared Goff?
I probably would. I know it's a crap matchup, but I probably would.
What if we got down to the Gardner Minshew, David Carr zone?
Minshew, see, if Pittman plays, I'll use Minshew. If Pittman's out, give me Lawrence. As far as that, yeah, I'm going Lawrence over. I mean, is Carr going to finish the game? Like, I don't even know what's going on with Derek Carr, man. I really don't. Like, maybe you can enlighten me, because that is.
Well, I don't know. I can't enlighten you or the listeners. I do know that the Saints are happy if they get ahead, 17-3. They're not throwing a pass in the second half. They're just going to try to win the football game. So it's tough. You need a shootout with Derek Carr, and he's another one, kind of like Russell Wilson. It's like there are a lot worse quarterbacks than Derek Carr. Yeah, stats aren't always there. He's always beat up. You don't know if he's going to finish the game. It's like I think Derek Carr. It's funny. He's one of 3 quarterbacks ever for 3,000 passing yards their first 9 seasons, whatever the hell it is. Like he's not that bad, but to your point, yeah, I don't have confidence in starting him. And I think
coaching matters.
It does. It does. Schemes, game flow, all that kind of stuff. You mentioned that earlier too. A final question on this before we move on. Triggerfinger says, Geno Smith or Trevor Lawrence? Rich Maletto had to decide against these 2 disappointing quarterbacks. Which one would he go with this week?
I despise both of them right now. I'm going Geno. I can't trust the shoulder with Lawrence. I can't trust the O-line. This may be one where I would regret it later, but I'm going Geno here.
You mentioned, you sent me a note right before the show started, Rich, and we're going to start talking a little bit about injured players. And you wanted to kind of broad picture the discussion about injuries this time of year and all that. Share with the listeners what your thought was with that comment.
I kind of wanted to get your feedback. Ray, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, but I mean, it's not, look, you're not that much older than me, right? I mean, but you've been doing this a long time, and you and I have talked off behind the scenes, calculating by newspapers, doing it by hand, setting up formats so it was easy to score by hand, all these things, right? And when we first started doing that, those of us that felt like we really had an edge was because we felt like we either knew where to get the info, how to get the info, or had the info, right? Whether it was because we watched the game or whatever. And this is before Sunday Ticket existed, right? So it's not like we had the opportunity to watch every game. We were at the mercy of whatever in-market games we watched. And like we had a rule in one of the leagues I was in, you could only go off the box score. And so you didn't know, healthy inactives weren't really a common thing. Did the guy play or not play? And so if you had a 0 as far as no touches, no work, it's not like we couldn't go to NFL.com, pull up the playbook and look at snap share. Like that stuff didn't exist. So you had to kind of work for this information. And we had, hey, the guy didn't play. This guy was automatically the backup, or we went to the next highest on the bench. We did different things like that. We really started to lean on beat writers, I would say, in the early 2000s, where we were getting pretty good info. Like we would find out, hey, so-and-so didn't practice today. The team's very quiet. I saw him limping on the field, so on and so forth. We used to get some honest feedback from people's eyes. Maybe they aren't really good at watching football per se, but we were getting factual info. They were on the sideline. They were on the bike. They were warming up. The team said this. Now it's like we're getting information that is intentionally misleading. Like we are getting these beat reporters to either just be mouthpieces for the teams. And, I go back to Arthur Smith getting fined for the whole Bijan Robinson thing and him getting all offended about, this is just creating drama. Here's the problem. And I had this discussion with my dad. We were in Discord and somebody won like 10 grand or 60 grand on a DFS play. Someone else won 6 grand or 8 grand on a bet. Okay. These things swing significantly. If you bet the under on Bijan Robinson, knowing that he had a headache and wasn't going to play, that was big. And I understand a lot of these books are giving money back, but offshore's not. And at some point, this is going to stop. These books aren't going to just give away money. They're doing it to keep people roped in. But my point being is Arthur Smith wants to think that it's a game and he's being all creative and he's not showing the other team what they're doing. What they don't realize is there's vested interest from us fans. And the more vested we are from a betting and DFS and fantasy standpoint, the more in tune, the more we're tuning in, the more we're willing to pay to have 5 different streaming options just to be able to watch all the games. When you start taking away my vested interest, I'm not as motivated to do those things. And it's gotten really frustrating. And I don't think the team, the beat reporters are being the mouthpieces because that's how they're keeping a job, right? I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds me. At the same time, I don't, these teams think they're being super creative, but, like I told my dad, you're telling me that 100% of all the employees around the Atlanta Falcons that game didn't know that Bijan Robinson was limited in some way, shape, or form? I don't buy that. Somebody knew somewhere. And I also don't buy that they're not willing to make phone calls to buddies, to friends, to anyone else going, hey, just so you know, this dude's not playing. He's not looking well. I'm not saying that happens regularly, but I'm telling you, if I was one of those staff members, I'm not above saying, I'm not going to say something to somebody. We know these players play fantasy. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that the other employees on the teams don't? Come on, man. We got a guy that's in a NASCAR garage. They have different, this one league he's won 2 years in a row was all Penske garage folks for the most part. We see this. It's not like these people don't have lives and they're not humans. So I'm just very frustrated that we're not getting any info on any of these injuries. We're finding out so last minute. We're finding out very little. And I kid you not, Ray, back in 2010, we were being told right now, Mari Cooper's got a blah, blah, blah ankle. Mm-hmm. They think that's what it is. His odds of playing tonight are probably 70, 80%, but they want to test him out. They think he'll be a little bit limited, but we'll have to see when he's on the field. You and I would take that and go, he's playing. Look, guys, they're going to shoot it up. He might be a little bit limited, but temper your expectations. Don't expect 250. But, 80 yards and a touchdown, 120 touchdowns still in play, depending on the matchup. And we're not getting it. And I guess my thing was, Ray, I kind of wanted to get your take on it because I know you've been a part of this circuit much longer than I have. You've been much more in tune with this. I don't know why it's changed and what's changed other than COVID happened. People got lazy and they found ways to do the job without actually being there. And nobody seems to care now.
Well, we know that some beat writers do, they do interviews from their house. Like they're not even traveling with the team. And that's not traveling with the team. Like that's, hey man, I got to drive from the Rams here to like Southern California, right? It's bad. And I think what has basically happened is everything gets outsourced now. We see it in our industry sometimes too, right? Everything gets outsourced and everything's AI and everything. And it's come to the point because we all do this. We check Twitter Sunday mornings. We're doing Stardom Cinema advice. There's like 3 people that break stories. It's like it. If it's not coming from Schefter, if it's not coming from him or what's his face, Rappaport or like Palmer, like there's like a handful of guys that's it. Pellicero, excuse me, that's it. And then we'll get the beat reporter will report it 5 minutes before the inactives are listed. And it's like, you're not giving me anything. The inactives will be out in 5 minutes. You're not changing the ball game here at all. So I don't know, Rich. I think that there's a lot of reasons for it, but I think you hit it directly would be my final answer would be that they work for the team. And I think that the days of, hey, I got a news story that we're going to break it here. Hey, Rich, I got a story. They don't do that anymore. They don't do it anymore. And, how does Adam Schefter at, 6 a.m. on a Sunday rip off 12 tweets that has every bit of information about every player, whether they're on the Colts or the Niners or the Raiders or the Broncos? How does he know all that? Because someone's saying, hey, Adam Schefter, here's the answer. But they don't tell their own beat writers. Their own guys covering the team aren't sitting there watching them. The beat writers themselves are limited sometimes at what they can even watch and report on. There are rules the NFL has put in place. The beat writers can't report certain things they see at practice. They'll get fired. So I've never understood either. There's so much money involved in fantasy, in whether it's DFS or seasonal, in the betting piece. I can't believe that it's gone on as long as it has this badly. Because there's billions, literally billions of dollars at stake with this. And there's been talk of class action lawsuits with the Joe Burrow thing and the Bijan. At some point, league's going to get theirs, Rich. They just have to.
I guess what I find really more concerning is what you just said there at the end. There's a lot of money on this. Okay. I am a tinfoil hat wearer. Okay. So you can poke fun at me and push back. I'm not going to be offended. I wonder how much behind the scenes money is involved with some of this. Like, is Vegas getting the info that us laymen's aren't? for example? Is there compensation made somewhere that people writing the lines, whatever it is, because I can't believe that these books that have, look, I don't care if I'm a high roller. Even high rollers is only talking thousands of dollars. These houses have millions of dollars of money backing up their lines. I mean, we talk about it's a Super Bowl, one touchdown, how it skews and how much the book makes or the book loses. I guess what I'm getting at is they stand to lose a lot more than the average Joe, you or I. We can do a class action lawsuit, but the $5 or $25 that we're going to get out of the deal is not going to make a difference. However, somebody that, and I'm not above saying the mafia is involved or anything like that. Like I get all tinfoil-esque. I go deep here. But my point being is I don't believe that they're going to be willing to not have the information and be willing to take these losses with so much money on the line. And so I'm frustrated because I feel like we're not on an even playing field, that folks like you and I are struggling. We are working hard to get this information. When people ask me questions about players and I'm like, wait, I didn't hear about an injury. Yes, I do layman things like go Google. I go to the team's website. I click on the website's writer. Like I start digging into these rabbit holes, trying to find any and all information. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I was trying to find information on Alexander Madison's ankle. Nothing. I could barely find out that it was an actual ankle. I had to go to the game day broadcast when it happened to find it was an ankle. Everything since then, he's not practicing. No information. And I don't believe that the books are taking that lightly or going, yeah, we don't need information. Bullshit. Either they're not putting lines out because they don't have the information like we saw in the Seahawks game. I don't know if you noticed that, but right up until kickoff, you couldn't find any lines on any Seahawks, not DK. That was the whole
who's going to quarterback that week?
Geno Smith locked playing. None of them. No Kenneth Walker, no rushing, no lines. So you're telling me when everybody was joking that we didn't know who the quarterback was, that Vegas pulled all their lines and wasn't going to do it, but they're fine putting lines out with all this other crappy information? I just don't buy it, Ray. I feel like there's something behind the scenes going on. And honestly, us laymen's, we've got to be careful. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Joel says that you should pull the curtains closed and roll around on the ground tonight because you're going to get whacked, Rich. Watch your back tonight.
The wife tells me that all the time. I got to be careful what I say on podcasts. She keeps telling me that all the time.
Speaking of injuries this week, bringing it back to week 17, we don't know with Josh Palmer. He's got a concussion issue. So we don't know if he's going to play. We don't know with Michael Pittman, who's dealing with zone concussion issue. Josh Jacobs continues to we don't got a lot of info. They keep saying he's okay to play. He keeps not playing. So we're dealing with that. Isaiah Pacheco's got a concussion issue. And then we've got the Jordan Addison news. We're uncertain with Jordan Addison. And Jalen R asked a question here. And this name has come up over and over and over and over and over. Let's be very clear about the ankle issue with Jordan Addison, because I've seen people say this, he's been ruled out. Jordan Addison has not been ruled out. We don't know if he's going to play. Okay. I don't know if he's going to play. Rich doesn't know he's going to play, but we do not know if he is going to play or not. The team has not ruled Jordan Addison out yet. In fact, there was a report saying the exact opposite. He's got a chance to play. Everyone's been asking about KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne is not usable, right, if Jordan Addison is active, in my opinion.
I would agree.
Okay. 2, we don't know. Their own head coach of the Vikings has said any one of our 3 quarterbacks could start this week. We don't even know who their quarterback is going to be. Okay. So the question from Jalen says, do I start Terry McLaurin this week for the finals? On the bench, I have Noah Brown. CJ Stroud is likely to come back from his concussion this week. On the bench, I have Noah Brown, KJ Osborne, and Rashid Shaheed. So of those 4, McLaurin, Brown, Osborne, and Shaheed, who are you going to play? Maybe I should say of those 3, because I don't think you're going to say Mr. Osborne.
No, you're correct. Regardless, I'm going Terry. Jacoby has had a history of leaning on his top 1 or 2 guys. And yeah, he does like the tight end too. So Logan Thomas, for those of you streaming tight end, while he has been completely off the radar for the last month and a half, he should be back on. Last week's performance showed that. But I'm going Terry. I think, honestly, I will not be shocked, Ray, if Terry has his best performance of the year from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, he did, finish with a couple catches, 2 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown from Brissett a couple of weeks ago. Brissett has looked better than Sam Howell. We'll see how it goes. Yep. We can discuss whether the timing of the move and all that, but he has looked better. Okay, so I agree with you there. I'd be starting McLaurin. You have an article over at fantasyguru.com. It's your weekly streamer article. And in that, you try to, as you mentioned earlier on the show today, pick out some guys that, maybe are out there that people can turn to. And one guy that I think it depends upon your league setup, the size of your league, how active people are. Demario Douglas is someone that you've got listed there this week. And like in my league, there's a league where I've been starting him for weeks when he's healthy, right? Because it's like I'm in a 14-teamer and with 3 wide receivers and all of that.
He's a perfect start for you then.
Yeah, he is. But talk to us about him because that Bailey Zappi has been effective. He actually has been effective. And Douglas is catching 5 passes every week in a PPR setup. There's definitely worse guys you could turn to because his floor doesn't have a ceiling, but his floor is pretty high.
So I think, people soured on a little bit because he got hurt. And then when the quarterback change went to Zappi was kind of leaning on Parker. Like Devonta Parker has quietly become that same kind of role. He's not getting as many targets as Douglas, but he's getting that like consistently now. It's been like 44 catches for close to 70 yards. So he's been in that 7, 10, 12-point range in a PPR. And Zappi seems to have a thing for Parker. At least it looked that way for the first few weeks. But quietly, Douglas has come back in the fold. And look, we know in this Bill O'Brien offense, that slot receiver role that Douglas plays, it should be active. He should be seeing 6 or more targets a week, right? Probably closer to 8 targets, but 6 to 8 catches a week, 40, 50, 60, 70 yards. I was shocked. So just to give you some background, Ray, what I do in that article is I refuse to use anybody that's at 40% or more because I feel, and I am using generic ownership percentage. It's not one site like Yahoo or ESPN. I'm using another site that's polling everybody's or trying to. And I do that just to try to keep me honest. I try to find players that are less than 20% owned because I feel like if you're honestly trying to stream a body for the week, you are scraping the bottom of the barrel on the waiver wire. And so we should be trying to help you find some of these really, really low owned guys. Excuse me. Douglas, it was a lot lower owned than I thought. Like because of what you said, and I'm in a couple of similar style leagues, he's been hard to keep off of rosters because you're not finding, and that's what was interesting about Parker. I grabbed Parker right at the start of the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs because it was exactly that. I looked, I'm like, he's getting 10 or 12 points a week. Like, what happened all of a sudden? And that's what Douglas is doing. Douglas should be rostered, honestly, Ray. I mean, outside of, you brought up, format, outside of 10-team leagues, maybe if you're only starting 2 receivers, he's not worth it. But Douglas has been kind of sneaky, man. And to your point, Zappi has been effective. Like, it's amazing what this Patriots offense can do when people just do their jobs.
And the quarterback isn't turning the ball over 4 times a week.
Right.
Yeah. Amazing. Another player listed in your article, and this is the guy that, this team is without the starting quarterback. The team is without their wide receiver 2. They may be without their wide receiver 1 again in Keenan Allen. They may be without their wide receiver 3 and Josh Palmer. And here's Gerald Everett, who's catching 5 passes every week, right? Because there's no one left. He's working with a young quarterback. He is listed in your article, Gerald Everett. So talk to us a little bit about him. And then we have a question from Henry, who also is asking, in a half-point PPR, would you start the aforementioned Gerald Everett or Darren Waller this week?
So, interestingly enough, Everett and Ferguson are both getting like 8 targets a game for the last month. I mentioned Ferguson because most people have Jake Ferguson. We don't see them question if they want to start. We see people wanting to start him, right? Like, sometimes we have to talk people off, like it's still the tight end, don't use him at a flex type of thing, right? My point being, though, is if he's seeing the same type of volume that Ferguson is, why are we not talking about Everett in that same breath? I understand Easton Stick's not all that, but literally go back and look. Everett's been getting 8 targets a game in the last 3 weeks. So I get Waller's been okay, and I do think Waller with Tyrod Taylor will be better than what we've seen because the few games we saw Waller with Tyrod, he was better. But I'll be honest, Ray, I'm playing Everett over Waller in this setup.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I said it kind of circularly here, but there is a scenario that plays out this week where the wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 of the Chargers aren't playing.
Right.
Like, aren't on the field. And that group behind them, 4, 5, 6, there's a bunch of 5'9" dudes, and it's not.
They're not good.
It's not, yeah. And so Everett becomes a very appealing streaming option. I agree completely with Rich there. And the tight end position has been better than we anticipated. That's also fair to say. In years past, recently, guys like Gerald Everett, you couldn't find a guy catching 5 passes a week on the waiver wire. Couldn't do it at the tight end position. That guy was scooped up for 50% of your budget in week 3, right? Like that was a huge thing. But this year, there have been some options. If you want more options, that you could possibly turn to this week off the waiver wire. Rich and I are always in Discord over at fantasyguru.com. His article is up right now. The weekly streamer article over at fantasyguru.com is also available. We'll link to it on the YouTube page. You can see it there, directly go, or you can obviously go to fantasyguru.com. I mentioned earlier, Rich, I was very bad. I mentioned my own personal social media, at the Ray Flowers, but I didn't allow you to mention yours. So why don't you give the listeners where they can find you beyond the website as well?
I don't know if that was so bad, Ray. Do we really want him going to my social media? I mean, let's be honest here, man.
Good point.
So you can find me on X or Twitter at Fantasy Bosco. I am on Instagram, but I don't really do any football stuff on Instagram. I will say this. If you want a breath of fresh air, follow Ray on Instagram. Like, I kid you not, I probably interact more with Ray there than anywhere else. But we're both cat people. I'm not as big of a cat person, but we're both pet people. So Ray's Instagram is just it's a blast. It's fun. So I recommend checking it out. I follow Dexter as well and Ollie. So, I mean, he does it well, but you can see dog pictures there. That's about all I post on Instagram, dog and football jerseys or photos. And honestly, I don't even know what my handle is on Instagram. I probably have to type it out. So you can find me on X.
It's a B. Bazooka. What is it?
I think it's Balzania.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
I think it's Balzania.
Yeah.
Which is a play off my Facebook. Long story. I could tell you sometime, Ray, but I changed my name on Facebook to Harry Balzania, Balzonja. And there's this whole story behind it, but it stuck. So that's what my Facebook name is. So if you're ever prompted to befriend somebody with that name, Ray, and there's a picture of a Doberman, that is me. You haven't been hacked, because you've come up in mine a couple of times, and I'm thinking, man, he's probably wondering who the heck this guy is, because I've gotten that before. But anyway, if you really want to find me on Facebook, you can find me there. But Twitter X is about the best place you can find me for fantasy football stuff.
And you can find, again, Rich and I over at fantasyguru.com. The promo code's on the screen right now. Actually, the promo code's not on the screen right now. The promo code is now on the screen, FSD20. That gets you 20% off all the products, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, racing, whatever it is, FSD20. We also have that promotion going, even though there's no code necessary. You can sign up for the DFS NFL package the rest of the season. That's this week, next week, and all the playoffs all the way through the Super Bowl. Just $50 right now at fantasyguru.com. And that gets you articles, live streams, Discord, all the interactions for fantasy in the DFS space if you're interested in doing that as well. So, Rich, I think we're kind of out of time here today. Appreciate you jumping in. Again, Kyle Elfrink will be back tomorrow. Really a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on. And I'll let you get back to the hard work of answering the thousands upon thousands of questions from our winning members who are in the finals over on Discord at fantasyguru.com.
Hey, don't downplay your role there, Ray. You have been amazing the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You have been in there so much. I've gotten burnt, and I've been in there less. And thank goodness you have stepped up, because I am thoroughly impressed with the amount of questions you have hammered out and answered in willingness to, I just gave up. I told people I'm done. Your start sit on Tuesday, Wednesday. Don't, because I've given off so much bad information on Tuesday and Wednesday on it. I'm just not doing it. I can't handle the guilt I feel on Sunday answering those questions. I spent a lot of time on Friday writing the start sit, and to Ray's point, because of the lack of info, I don't think you guys realize how much time I spend on Saturday updating or trying to update it because of the way it all works out. So the idea of doing it Tuesday, Wednesday. But Ray, thank you so much for having me on. You and Kyle are so good at this, and I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun for me. Getting to be able to talk shop with you, Ray, has been just a true pleasure. So thank you so much. You got it. Again, that's Rich Maletto. I'm Ray Flowers. Thank you again, Rich. Kyle will be back tomorrow, and we'll continue to hammer out the best options for you in Week 17 as you push for those championships. And if you're next week, right, you're still playing in Week 18, whether it's DFS or seasonal stuff, we're still going to be here. The show doesn't go away. We're going to be here all next year too. That's the plan in 2024. Tell a friend it's free, all that good stuff. Use that promo code FSD20 to sign up as well at fantasyguru.com. I'm Ray Flowers for Rich Maletto. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com.